Hey everybody, it's Matthew, and I want to spend a few minutes answering a question that I get asked a lot, and that is, how do I renew my real estate license in Virginia? And you think it'd be straightforward, right? But it's not. We don't make it easy here. So let me break down for you the three categories of license renewal, how or who they apply to, and how you go about tracking what you need. So first, you need to understand that every real estate agent in Virginia is on a 2-year cycle. However, depending on what stage of your career you're on, depends on how quickly you need to get the hours to complete that 2-year licensing cycle. So the first category is brand new licensees. You just got your license today, great, yay. You now need to take 30 hours of what we have labeled post-licensing education. That's PLE. So 30 hours of PLE, and you need to do that in the first 12 months of your 2-year cycle. If you don't complete your 30 hours in the first 12 months, your license goes inactive until you do complete it, and then you can carry on with the rest of the cycle. At the end of 2 years, you will need to take now continuing education. Continuing education is a 16-hour requirement for agents after their first 2 years. So for every 2 years thereafter that you need to take those 16 hours, they need to be completed within the end of the 2-year cycle. Now, of course, I'm always going to remind you, do not wait to the 11th hour. The third category is for associate brokers and principal brokers and supervising brokers. So basically anybody with broker in their license type. That is also a 2-year cycle. You also need to do the 16 hours that real estate salespersons need to take, and then an additional 8 hours. Whether you're actually managing or not, there's 8 hours, 2 of which are broker supervision and the other balance of the 6 or whatever broker approved classes you have. So again, you've got PLE, which is 30 hours in the first year. You've got CE, which is 16 hours within your 2 years. And then you've got brokers, which is 16 plus the 8 hours for 24 hours in your 2-year cycle. Some things are pretty important to look for. One, you need to visit the DPOR website if you didn't keep track of your hours and see what they've given you credit for, what's been applied for your license, and make sure you're taking the mandatory topics, whether you're PLE or broker or CE. Each one of those categories not only says you need to take 30 or 16 or 24 hours, but you also need to take them in these specific categories. So X number of hours for contract, X number of hours for fair housing and real estate law and regulation. And not all classes that every school offers in Virginia are approved for all of those. So when you're signing up for a class, you need to be very clear that when you apply for the class, when you're signing up for it, that it includes the hours you need. Now remember, not all clock hours equal continuing ed hours. So for example, I may have a class that is approved for 3 hours of contracts for new agents. And so it would have 3 hours of PLE credit, which goes towards new agent renewal for their first year. That same class may rise to the level of also including information that a broker or a salesperson who's experienced could also benefit from. And so that class may carry with it also the 3 hours for post-licensing education, as well as 2 hours for continuing education. Notice that it's 2 hours for continuing ed, but 3 hours for PLE. The class itself is still 3 hours, but you only get 2 hours of credit, even though you had to attend the entire 3 hours to get those 2 hours. So if you're an agent who's pretty, time sensitive and you're keeping track of that, you may not want to sign up for a 6-hour post-licensing education contract class that only carries 2 hours of CE, because you'll need to take this entire 6 hours just to get those 2 hours. You may want to find a more appropriate class that is only maybe continuing ed for CE or broker license. Also remember, you can take classes in hours and surplus. So going back to my same example, if you are an agent who needs 2 hours of CE for contracts, but you take a 3-hour contract class, some of those hours may actually be surplus and go towards your real estate related topics, which is kind of this dumping ground we have for all the excessive training you've taken, which wasn't approved for your mandatory topics, which all this may make a little more sense when we get on the website and take a look at what those hours are. All right, to look up your license, you're going to go to dpor.virginia.gov, and on the left-hand side, you're going to click on License Lookup, and then you're going to enter your name. When you enter your name, it's going to show you a list of licenses you may hold. Assuming that you aren't a broker or don't multiple licenses, you'll just see your name, or maybe someone with a similar name, you'll choose on that name. Over here, see your license number, You can click on that hyperlinked license number and it'll show you your basic information. Your name as it's licensed to DPOR and your real estate license number, the status that you are, when you got licensed, and if you're a broker, it shows you your rank effective date as to when you became a broker and then when your license expires, that being the very important date here to make sure you get your credit in. And then we're going to click over here to continuing education. Continuing education, whether you're PLE or broker or CE, will look different here. It'll tell you by the parentheses if it's CE, PLE, or broker. That's what you're due now. That's what you're needed. That's what you have that you need. It'll show you the hours that are required by DPOR. Remember what I said, that if you're PLE, you're going to have 30 hours, but certain of those hours are in required areas, and there's a certain minimum number of hours that need to be realized in that area. So this will tell you the number of hours you have, how many hours you've completed of that minimum required number, and how many you are lacking. So I have all my hours here and I'm ready for renewal, even though I've got another 2 years. I get mine done early. So you've got down here the surplus hours. That's when you've exceeded whatever the minimum required hours are for each category. They just go into the surplus hour. Now, if you do take a class, let's say you take legal updates, it's a 3-hour legal update class, you only needed one. For simplification, DPOR shows you need one, you have one. Everything else went to real estate related until you have 8. And then everything in excess of 8 goes into this surplus. Certain surplus hours, and I really don't know what the algorithm is, do carry over or can carry over to your next license cycle. I don't really have clarity on which ones do and don't, so I wouldn't assume that any of them did. But that would tell you how many that you have more than what you need. So that's it. Those are your hours. That'll tell you what you need. And if you look and say, okay, I need 2 hours of broker supervision, you should go look for 2 hours of broker supervision as it applies to a broker's license in whatever catalog for whatever school you're looking for. So pretty simple. This is usually up to date. It usually takes 24 to 48 hours from processing to show up on the page. It's not instant. So if the school said, hey, we just processed them this afternoon, it'll be tomorrow morning after usually 6 o'clock a.m. before you see them posted on here. But that's it. Pretty simple website. And it'll tell you, it doesn't tell you what school or anything. It just tells you how many hours you have. That's it. A couple tips there that help you out, I hope. But again, your license renewal cycle is your responsibility. If you fail to renew, so if you're post-licensing education, you got to get those 30 hours in the first year. If you don't complete in the first year, they'll suspend the license until you do finish them to finish out the 2-year cycle. That's the true for CE and for broker. That's true, but you have 2 years to do it, and then they expire your license until you get your credit and pay your renewal fees, and then get active again. So pretty important to keep track of your license. Education is a critically important part of what we do, as we are knowledge workers, and you should take it pretty seriously. Don't wait to the 11th hour, and keep very careful track of when you sign up, what is being offered versus what you need. The last thing I will remind you of is 2 things, actually. One is if you take the same class twice, you do not get credit twice. Each school in Virginia is issued a different approval number in every single class across the board. So if you take a class with me on contracts and then 1.5 years later take the exact same class, it's going to have the same approval number. DPOR is not going to give you credit for it. But if you take a contract class through the Realtor Association, even though it may be the same content, they have a different approval, you probably get the credit for it. And they just don't want you sitting through the exact same program multiple times just to get your credit. The second part, outside of just your keeping track of not duplicating the class, is for agents who do have disciplinary action. Oftentimes DPOR will issue, along with a financial penalty, the requirement to take a classroom session. Now, as of right now, it's beginning or end of 2020. We're in a pandemic, and so we can do all our classes virtually. We don't know what will happen when we go back to a blended or hybrid class with real life. But for now, DPOR is counting the virtual classroom, so long as you're live and on camera, as taking care of those disciplinary classes hours that you need. Do remember, if it's a disciplinary class, if you're required to take agency, for example, because of some mistake you made, it will not count towards your license renewal, and you can't take it again with the same school. So those disciplinary hours are non-credit hours, but they have to be approved classes. So if you were to take agency with me as part of relieving some penalty at DPOR, and again, you sit through 3 hours of agency with me, you're not going to get the 3-hour credit. I'm going to issue a certificate so you can send it to DPOR and show that you met the standard. but you will need to take agency with some other school or a different type of agency class with me that carries the same credits to also renew your license. Those are two different types of classes you have to take. So hopefully that clears up any questions you have about it. I know it's a little long-winded for a video, but I want to make sure I covered all these things because this is a very routine topic that I get, and I want to make sure I covered this so I could send it out and fully explain what the process is for license renewal. So with that, we're going to jump right in and get our license renewed, and hopefully you won't have any problems. Thank you so much for watching.